this isn't actually that impressive. Now, I'm not flexing here. I don't want people going, well, stand back, badass. This is actually not me showing off. This is basic proficiency. And the reason why I say this is that this is only at 10 meters. And while I know that many of you would crave to get a grouping like this, regardless of what bow type you're using, this actually isn't illustrative of high skill. This just shows basic proficiency. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is that when people watch videos of archers on YouTube, they can be deceived unknowingly and unintentionally by camera angles. So when someone shoots a grouping like this at a relatively close target, they're given badges of honor by the viewers. They think, oh wow, you're so good, you should be in the Olympic Games. But then when you look at Olympic shooters who are shooting 70 meters on a big target, the size of the target and the camera angle makes it look a lot closer than it actually is. And people tend to mock them for, using sights and stabilizers and taking the easy way out and having no skill and so on. And really, this is a matter of perspective, both literally and figuratively. I know many of you who are watching this are perhaps new to archery or haven't really done it before, perhaps once or twice at school or camp, and you're at the level where you're barely hitting the target. Half your arrows are missing, and whatever bullseyes you get are flukes. So, to be fair, we do make it look easy, and it's only right for me to show you how I do this. The method I use is called gap shooting, and I use the point of the arrow and measure a gap visually from the center of the target to where the arrow is when I pull it back at full draw. And for me, at 10 meters here, as long as the arrow is in this area down here, the arrow is going to go here. That's all I have to do. And I'll prove it. So, 10 meters, same spot each time. And take note that even with a bad shot, I'm still hitting the same spot. I might be collapsing the shot, I might be rushing, I might be anchoring, I might be dropping my hand, I might be dropping my bow arm. There might be a lot of form faults which are clear and present to experienced shooters who are watching this. But I'm still hitting the same spot. And again, most people might point out that, oh, that was sloppy, it was loose, you collapsed, but I still hit the same spot. Oh no, that's one outside the 10 ring, that's terrible, I should retire now. But no, in all seriousness, it's actually not that hard. And like I said, we make it look easy because it does take a lot of time to develop the basic proficiency of how to have correct form. So your anchor point, your expansion, your release, it takes time to acquire this skill and make it second nature. But once you get that, it's really not that hard. And especially at a close distance like 10 meters, where many beginners start out, it's basically a sign of proficiency, that you are doing the same thing consistently and therefore achieving consistent results. And because this feat is fairly easy to accomplish, even for an average barebow shooter like me, and bear in mind, this isn't my primary style, people get carried away with using this as a benchmark for proficiency. They see results, they see, oh, tight grouping, or they might see, bang, Robin Hood, and they think, wow, such a good archer. An example of this is SurvivalLilly. If you see her comments in her practice videos, especially when she's shooting at the block targets, people will say, oh, you're so good, you split an arrow, you're Robin Hood, you're going to be Olympic Games. And she doesn't intentionally make a point of this. But I think because people aren't used to seeing archery or might be deceived by the small target or the close distance and the camera angle, people assume that this is really, really good. It's not really a test of accuracy because at 10 meters, it's actually very forgiving. Like I showed before, sloppy technique and small errors are easily forgivable if the arrow doesn't have a chance to deviate from its flight path and therefore hit a very generous target. This is why I think people don't respect distance enough, because a competitive shooter will be doing this at 5 times the distance or 7 times the distance. And that's a much greater margin for error. Small flinches, small inconsistencies, small reflexes, and even wind drift will cause the arrow to go much further off target. So what I was doing at 10 meters before wouldn't get this grouping at 30 meters. It would have a much larger grouping at 30 meters and looks less impressive. And again, I don't think other shooters on other channels are deliberately misleading people. The 10-meter distance might be the most convenient distance or the safest distance or the most comfortable distance. After all, if you can't reliably hit a target at 10 meters and you're fetching arrows, it's not a very good video. But many people will just use a target and just put it here and shoot at it to test a bow or review a product. And that's kind of what I'm pointing out here. This is basic proficiency. People who've been trained or have practiced doing archery should be able to accomplish this at 10 meters without that much effort. And like I said, I'm not a particularly skilled barebow shooter. It's not my primary method. I don't really practice it. But I just point out that point here, let go, and you hit here. And you can actually see this when you run the beginner line. All they have to do is be told where to aim and to get it on target. Again, this is simplified, it makes it look easier than it sounds, but if you can do it right and you know how to control a bow, then this is actually quite achievable even on your first day. I also should point out that for an experienced archer, such as myself, getting a Robin Hood where you split an arrow at this distance is not impressive. As you can see, it's a matter of probability, not skill. Like I said, I review bows in this space because it's the most convenient space. It's only 10 meters, there's less walking around and fetching things, but it's enough for me to validate that a bow is shootable, that it works. There's been perhaps like one bow which didn't pass this test, and that was really embarrassing. But for the most part, I'm not trying to prove that I'm a good shooter. I'm trying to prove that the bow can be used for the purpose it's intended for. If I can get a grouping like this at 10 meters with any bow, then the bow is fine. Here, at least, in a controlled space where I can guarantee a grouping at 10 meters with less effort, means that it's probably not user error. If I take this bow out and shoot at 30 meters and I group much wider or I miss the target, is it the bow or is it me? I probably know that it's me, but people watching might think, oh, the bow sucks. So it's my responsibility to test the bow in a controlled environment where I can isolate whether the bow is causing problems or I'm causing the problem. And that's something else to watch out for when looking at other bow reviews from perhaps less experienced reviewers or archers, especially shooting at a distance they're not comfortable at. Is it the bow that's causing the arrows to go everywhere? Is it the archer? Is it the choice of arrows? There are a lot of factors, and sometimes the reviewers themselves, again the inexperienced ones, may incorrectly attribute inaccuracy to themselves or to the bow or to the arrows without considering what they're doing and why. And again, I can prove fairly easily with any bow and any set of arrows that there should be a predictable pattern. Archery is to an extent quite predictable. As long as you are pointing in the right direction and you execute the shot well, then that's the result you should be expecting. And by the way, I'm not trying to demean you or diss you if you can't do this. Again, this is just proficiency. Once you acquire enough confidence, then you can do this at 10 meters and it really shouldn't be a problem. This is a warm-up distance. Of course, if you're shooting for other purposes like hunting or target archery, then the actual thing you'll be doing will be a lot more difficult, and that's when the skill really separates. People who are proficient or very good at that particular style will shoot more accurately than people who are less confident and less proficient. So really, distance is the qualifier. The mistakes you make at this point here will be amplified at longer distance. So don't use this as a measuring stick for skill. Use the results at the actual distances people shoot at. For a hunter, it might be their accuracy or their grouping at 30 meters to 50 meters. That's what you normally see in 3D target courses. For target shooters, this might be 50 to 70 to even 90 meters, depending on the style, the bow, the classification, and the format of the competition. Bottom line is, just because I can do this at 10 meters doesn't mean I can do the same thing at further distances. If I wanted to validate my skill at this distance, I should be shooting at smaller targets and different locations, like a multi-spot target, to prove that I am actually aiming for each spot rather than just gravitating all my arrows in the same direction. It does feel good when you reach the level when you can prove this, but it's a sort of thing which looks more impressive than it actually is. And just to finish up, adding a challenge like a human silhouette at this distance doesn't change the difficulty of the shot. As long as I place the arrow in the same spot, I'm going to hit the same spot without ever touching the person. So, off style, snap shooting, bare bow, 10 meters. About a can size grouping. Isn't that impressive? Also, why we don't do this.